Okay, so express router. This was our example from yesterday where we did the movies. And it wasn't too bad as far as how big this file got. It's only 57 lines total with some nice spacing and such. But this is only representing one piece of the database, and there may be 5 other routes we'd want to be able to make for this movie. What if we want to give the users the ability to upvote or comment on movies or add them to their favorites? We have to introduce all these routes for how we're going to interact with our collection of movies in our database. And this file would grow and grow, where really our server.js file or a top level server file needs to be treated a lot like the index.js file of the create React app. It's where everything is kind of begun, but it leads to everything else that the app can do. Let's slim this down by using something called express router. So the first folder we're now going to introduce to the backend. We've only been dealing with the server file. There's 2 directories we're going to end up making as well. And the first one we need is the routes directory. This is not the only way to organize your backend. You'll see other ways of organizing routes and models and such on the web. This is just the convention we're choosing. You know, learn one, the other ones will make more sense. We're going to make a routes file, and this is going to be for any piece of data in our database that we need to interact with. We're going to have a route file for each one. So if our database had movies and TV shows and users, we'd have 3 different route files, one for the user routes, movie routes, TV routes. Well, this is for movies. So in the routes directory, we're going to make a file called movie router or movie routes. I'll let you choose, but movie router.js. And just like our server.js file, the first thing we need to do is get our package available to us. And we're still using Express for this. So I'll say const express equals require express. But the portion we need from Express isn't the server portion, it's the router package. So we're going to create our router variable here and call it movie route or movie router equals and express dot, then capital R router. The capital R, what does that tell you this function is, what it is? What type of function? Constructor. It returns an object with all the things needed to be a router. So this variable can do what our app variable is currently doing. We can say movie router.get, movie router.post. It's going to do the same thing, but now it's modularized and named so we know it's specifically for something in regards to movies. Well, before we do anything, add anything else to this, we're going to have to make sure this file is accessible to other files. So what is the keyword in Node for that? Something.exports, module.exports. You could say exports with a little bit more, it's a different syntax. We're going to keep with the module.exports equals movie router. So it is the only thing we're exporting from this file. Now I can go and take all my routes. So watch, we'll just highlight all the routes we made yesterday. We'll cut them out of this file, and we'll go put it in the movie router file. Just like that. Okay, and instantly our server.js is way easier to look at. And once we have a database, this won't even be here. So this file will get even smaller because everything leads to everything else. All right, well, in the movie router, does this variable exist anymore? It does not. We could export it from our server and import it here, but no, we already created our own router, so let's just use that. So every time I say the word app, I'm going to replace that with the word movie router, the express router we just created. So movie router, and then the rest, movie router. What else in this file? Variables that are not defined. There's some undefines in here. What is it? Movies. Yeah, so for while we're learning fake databases, before we actually introduce real databases, we need to move our data into the route file that's using it as well. So I'm going to move that in here. So now everything is consolidated in the movie router, the data and the routes. And later we'll just strip this out and connect to a database. Now this is even slimmer. Well, we need UUID because we're using that as well. This is all just extra right now. But we'll put that in here after it, fixes itself. Let's give it a second. Don't do it. Okay. No, not what I copied. Okay, so we pretty much moved everything that was in our server file over. Our server is like bare bones now, but this is what we want because there's more that we will add to this. But now we need to teach this file how to get access to the movie router file. Okay. So below the middleware that will fire on every request and above our server listen, we're going to add our routes. And we're going to use the keyword require to say, when you get a request to /movies, go look at this file because that's where all the routes are to handle those requests. And what we will use, which our next lesson will be on, is app.use. And we're using app.use here to say on every request, use this to look for a post object or a put object or some sort of object the user's sending. In this case, we don't want this to fire on every request. We only want this to fire if the request goes to /movies. So we're going to include the optional first argument and say this is only for requests to movies. And when you get this request, use the following file. Require the routes movie router. Okay. Questions at all on this syntax yet, or at this time?
So the first parameter
is the mount path, meaning only fire this middleware if the request is to this. The URL endpoint is to /movies. The second parameter, what file to use when the request hits this endpoint. So we're requiring the movie router. So we go over to movie router and we have all our endpoints here. So we're going to test this for a second to see if we can access these endpoints and find a fun little issue we get to deal with. But we have everything we need in here. We've replaced all the word app. We've pulled in our data. We've exported the movie router that we created. So this file is fine. Let's start up the server. Calm down. No, it sounds very exciting. Whatever's happening. Right. Okay, so what is the endpoint that I'm making this GET request to get all my movies? That is the question. Yesterday it was /movies, right? Let's try it. Let's go full here, okay. I'll hit send. Interesting. Suddenly I can't get my movies. Oddly enough though, if I say /movies, I get my movies. So something has happened here. My endpoint got larger and it's redundant. It's repeating itself. Where am I repeating myself, causing this request to have to be repeated? Well, it's right here. When I say app.use to /movies, I've already declared the endpoint that this file needs to use. This file is also declaring its own endpoint. So now to get to this, it's /movies just to get to this file, and then /movies again to hit the right route. We don't want that. So when we're using router, we don't have to restate our endpoint. We can get rid of this portion because the part on the server.js is already stating only get to this file if they've already requested to movies. So what's the rest of the endpoint? and then trigger the appropriate route. So it looks like these don't even have an endpoint anymore, but that's because we modularized it. This is automatically on the endpoint already. So with those removed, I can now remove my redundant movies, hit send, and all my routes will work the same. I should be able to get one by placing the ID. Cool. I know I can probably delete as well. Great. So routes work. And we replaced the 40 lines or so with this one line, so we could put it in another file. And if we had TV shows and users, that's strange. Our users, look at the user router, TV, look at the TV router. And now, even though we have 3 files that are each maybe 50, 60, or 100 lines long, full of logic and routes, the server file is just acting as kind of the where to go when a request comes in. We can look at all the endpoints that our website offers. Okay, any questions up to this point on how we made this happen? Is it straightforward-ish? Sometimes silence scares me. Most of the time, silence scares me. Okay. Well, there's one more portion of the movie router file that we can use, or the movie router package we can use, sorry, the express router, to make this even more modular. And it's up to you whether you want to do it this way. You can state every endpoint as is like this, you know, .get, .post, or you can kind of consolidate them. If they have a shared endpoint, like this post request and this get request, we're now being redundant again. We're having to say movie router. So if we want to avoid having to say that, we can bundle them together. So I'm going to refactor this. For the get and the post are the ones that go to /. So we're going to say movie router.route. And when the route is /, we can now chain on every request type. So if it's a .get, use this logic. Oops, I want to delete. Copy. To get, use this logic. If to post, use this. And now I can comment these out because it's already being handled by the route up above. All right, so they have a shared endpoint, /. And because of that, I can chain them together. And when a request comes to / movies, this will get triggered, and then it will check the request type and then run the appropriate block of code. What about the rest of the requests? Do they have a shared endpoint? Yeah, same thing, right? Even though they do very different things, they share the same endpoint. So this can be consolidated into a singular route as well. And say movie router.route to /:ID. And if it's a get, we'll do this. It's I'm taking a dramatic pause here because of what would happen if I didn't. My keyboard froze. Okay, there's .get. .delete. What? Yes. And the .put.
Does the order you're sharing doesn't matter?
It does not, because just like when they're separated, it'll first check the endpoint and then it will check the type of request that was sent. So any order doesn't matter. But if I did have .get and then another .get, this one is never going to be seen because this one is already going to be triggered, and the res.send will end the server process. Yeah, exactly. This one's the /, this one's the /, some parameter. Now let's comment all these routes out because they wouldn't be used anyways, and see if our server still works with this consolidation. So we'll do a get to movies. Great. Let's post the movie. Raw JSON. Genre fantasy. Send. Cool. It was added. So it looks like the get and post router is working just fine if I put the right endpoint. Harry Potter's added. And we'll just check one of the dynamic one or the ID ones. So let's delete Bambi 2. Cool, so everything's working. So you don't have to do it this way. If this makes more sense right now, splitting them up, do it that way. Either will work. The big thing is definitely do it this way. Definitely put your routes in their own file. And make sure the file is only for that specific piece of data. This file is only for handling any request to the movie section of my database. If any requests in here have to do with like the user, we have to have a really good reason to put it in there. And there are reasons, but we're separating it by piece of data.
I mean, it sounds like it really helps make your server faster because if it's reading the whole or all of the JavaScript, so like it would have to get through a ton of stuff before it gets to the actual route that it's supposed to. But here you can just say, okay, it's the endpoint movies, let me go to that JavaScript file. Otherwise, let me move on to the next line of JavaScript.
Exactly. Yeah, if the endpoint wasn't to movies, it would never even look at this file. So there's like 80 lines of code it doesn't have to check. It'll just move to the next route. And if that one matches, then it will go read that file and see what's happening. So how are you going to implement this? You're going to implement it into your Bounty Hunter app that you've just made or you're starting. And if you want the extra practice, I would suggest it. I would modularize your to-do Express app that or server you did yesterday as well. Just move them all into a route, make sure it works, then go do it to Bounty Hunter, make sure it works. Because this is how you'll be writing routes for the rest of the course in their own place. Any questions on Express Router? How we get access to it or use it?
So Express.router has a lot of the same functionality as just, I guess, the regular Express object.
Yeah. It's isolating the routing portion of the Express object that your server can do, right? We were saying app.get, app.post, but we can make as many of these as we want per, in different files for our different pieces of data.